Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss Netanyahu's latest attempt to avoid prison by triggering all-out war across the Middle East as he bombs Iran. Trump has completely lost control of the situation, the damage done by a load of Americans thinking they could get cheaper eggs. But first, for daily news and politics, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So Israel has attacked nuclear sites in Iran, killing at least one senior military commander. Iran will, of course, retaliate. In the past, Iran has retaliated with a fairly impotent show of force, which did nothing to really compensate for the damage they sustained, but are not keen on escalating into all-out war. But does there come a point where Iran will feel that without measures that result in a serious cost to Israel, they will just open themselves up to further attacks? At what point does the completely out of control Netanyahu risk open war across the Middle East? And how does the wider Israeli political system think that this is going to secure their future? At some point, there's going to be an honest evaluation of what Israeli forces have been doing in Gaza. Politicians can shut the judgment of history out for a time, but it will always do its work eventually. Perhaps Netanyahu can personally ride this out. Maybe he can maintain the conflict that allows him to claim a state of emergency for the rest of his life. He's 75 years old. Perhaps by the time he loses power, he'll be able to claim ill health and avoid legal consequences, dying in peace, a free man. But what about Israelis? They're going to have to come to terms with what their so-called defenders have done in their name at some point. The world is increasingly already doing so. Public opinion in countries where there is a free media have already turned on Israeli actions. Where they had enormous support in the wake of the Hamas attacks, the much grander scale of atrocities committed by the IDF since then has shifted views the other way. Netanyahu claims to be defending Israel and destroying Hamas. He's actually empowering Hamas and imperiling Israel. If he had supported the two-state solution, which is the only route to peace in the Middle East, he could actually have destroyed Hamas. They serve no purpose in a world where Israel lives in harmony with its Arab neighbours. Netanyahu is Hamas's greatest recruiting sergeant and Israel's deadliest enemy. And amongst powerful nations, the American public is the one, of course, most supportive of Israel. Half the problem. Even here, according to polling last month, 61% of the public think Israel is playing a negative role in the Middle East. That is a number that is rising. What will happen once the full truth is reported? What will happen when people see video and photos of what's really happening right now in a way that you can't dismiss as fake or fake news or whatever? I've said quite a few times now that I simply cannot understand how wider Israel cannot see this as far from working towards their security, risking their existence. Like when people say they support Israel, that doesn't mean they have to support everything they do. I support Britain, but I opposed the government we had for 14 years recently because I believed they were actually acting against Britain's interests. And I think I have plenty of evidence for that. The current Israeli government are acting against Israel's interests. The people most pleased with what Israel are doing beyond their own borders are those who wish for its destruction. There'll come a point where the wider Middle East has to act. They've done nothing to defend Palestinians other than raise objections, but they've actually done nothing of consequence. But if Netanyahu is willing to trigger all-out war across the Middle East, something will have to snap at some point. But how did we get to this situation? Well, Netanyahu is unhinged. We saw Biden struggling and failing to contain him. But Trump is utterly useless. He's been trying to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran. In reality, if he had not cancelled the original deal during his first term for the purposes of nothing more than political grandstanding, we would not be in this position. I am no supporter of the Iranian regime, and Iran, of course, is no friend of Britain's. But I will still say, if a country is threatened by a nuclear power, I don't think I can blame them for wanting to develop nuclear weapons themselves. The best way to encourage a country not to pursue nuclear weapons, surely, is to make them feel safe. Threatening to randomly bomb them whenever you're in a bad mood, that seems designed to do the opposite. But Trump had been rambling to reporters, as he often does. He had suggested that Israel should not attack Iranian nuclear sites because it would, in his words, blow up his negotiations. So he's basically saying to Israel, don't do that. He said he thought the negotiations were going well and that he could get a good deal. Of course, he always says that. But because his brain is shot to shit, he then rambled on like a man who should have long ago been sent to sit by the duck pond to while away his remaining days. Because he then added, Oh, I don't know though, because maybe attacking Iran would help negotiations. Like his exact words referring to a potential Israeli attack were, it might help it actually, but it could also blow it up. Absolute imbecile. Politicians normally consider every single word carefully. You know, usually with a political statement, you have to go through every word carefully, try not to read too much into it, but also trying to, take it at face value. They have to walk a narrow path, you see. They cannot afford stray words. Donald Trump just opens his mouth and lets words fall out like alphabetic spaghetti, and this is the result. So despite suggesting that Trump did not consider an attack to be useful to his own limited efforts, he effectively gave a green light for it to go ahead, or at least an amber light. The US are now distancing themselves from the attack quite strongly. Despite Trump's rambling, their considered view clearly was not that bombing Iran would help negotiations. In fact, this has now made Trump look incredibly weak on the world stage. The official position, despite his rambling, is that Israel should not have attacked Iran at this time. They did so, and now the US is left having to say they're taking action to protect their own people and forces in the region. They've been moving people out of their embassies. It's an open admission that Netanyahu has just endangered the lives of Americans. And yet Trump does nothing. Marco Rubio said Iran should not target US interests or personnel. I don't think he warned them against targeting Israel, which they inevitably will. We know Trump had spoken to Netanyahu earlier this week and told him not to attack Iran. Trump had publicly said this. Netanyahu has ignored the US president, not for the first time. Completely out of control. He's betting that Trump will ultimately not stop him, that he might gripe, but he won't stop him doing whatever he wants. And he will, so far, almost certainly be right. American foreign policy already seems to have shifted away from the two-state solution. Their ambassador was saying that it was his understanding now that the policy is to abandon the idea of a Palestinian state, or at the very least, if the Arab world wants a Palestinian state, they can carve it out of their own lands. A massive green light to the Israeli government to basically do what they want. What Netanyahu wants is to stay out of prison. But he's not acting alone. What his wider government coalition wants is seemingly for all-out war to claim that they then face an existential threat and for the USA to come steaming in and flatten the entire Middle East. You know, there was a time when I thought Israel would recognise the threat to its long-term security by going too far. Seemingly not. Seemingly not. I just don't understand the thinking. Netanyahu has limited time left on this earth. The Israeli nation presumably wants to survive into the next century. Its actions right now make that less likely. Because what ultimately you're going to do, if you make all of your neighbours hate you, what are the options? Your options are effectively a gated community, or you wipe out everyone else in the world. What the hell? And what will Iran do? It has to retaliate. What sort of retaliation? Will it be another show of bravado that splinters on Israel's defences, or will they intend to sting this time? To my own way of thinking, and I've yet to see an expert discussing this, I guess that if Iran just fires off a futile attack, it won't escalate things, but then it risks Iranians and the wider Arab world looking at them and going, that's a bit weak, isn't it? If they do cause damage, which Israel would consider damage, then all-out war takes a step closer to reality. Oil prices have already increased after the attacks, of course, just to emphasise that Israel's actions are destabilising the world, not defending anything. The US are clear that this action was not in coordination with them. They have apparently not said that they would definitely defend Israel against a counterattack, which is usually a given. Israeli media is suggesting that the attacks were coordinated with Washington. Washington is saying bollocks were they. We are now one giant leap close to all-out war in the Middle East, and the whole situation is completely confused from the American side. I get the impression that Arab leaders hold back because they're not in a brilliant position, and wider conflict would be disastrous for everyone involved. But if Israel continues to think it can just lord it over everyone else, threatening the security of their own lands, then something will have to give. You know, Trump has no idea what to do, largely, I suspect, because he doesn't really know what he wants to achieve. The damage done because too many Americans believed they'd get cheaper eggs by electing an obvious charlatan. The damage that is now going to be done to goodness knows how many millions, not just in the Middle East, elsewhere as other dangerous individuals around the world take advantage of the chaos that's going to come, to global stability, climate action. It will lead to a much less safe world. And what happens when you've got a frightened population? They are more likely to support extremist populists who will promise them cheaper eggs as well, but only deliver more fear and uncertainty. The repercussions of that US election last year could be insane. And it's not even like those eggs got any cheaper. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.